In this video, I will demonstrate implementing a design using SQL Server, Data Definition Language, or DDL, and Data Manipulation Language, or DML. What I have is an Excel spreadsheet with 3 different tables, and I want to import those into SQL Server and create an ER diagram, and then be able to write queries against those tables. I have SQL Server, in this case SQL Server Express, ready to go. And I have 2 choices if I want to implement this design. For everything I do, whether it's creating the database or creating the table or creating a constraint, I can do it either using the interface, for example using the menus or toolbars or using the right-click menu, or I can do it with code. So I'll show you the different steps that you need to take to import the data, and sometimes I'll use the interface and sometimes I'll use the code. But know, every time you create an object or you manipulate an object, you can do it either with code or with the interface with these relational database management systems. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is create a space for the database, and I'll show you that back in modules I have a file called SQL DDL DML code, and I have a number of examples of code that you could use for various things. So for example, I have code that creates a database, or the code that you would use to create a table, or drop, in other words delete a table. And there are other examples here as well. So if I'm going to create a database, the first thing I could do is come here and I could start a brand new query, and I could create the database using code. So I'll come back here, and here's the code for creating a database, and I'll just copy it and then paste it here in my screen. So the blue words are of course keywords, and then this is a placeholder for the database name that I want to give it, and so I'll call it sample database. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. I'll just press the F5 key to run this. And I'm looking for this confirmation down here, command completed successfully. And if I come over to the databases folder and I hit F5 to refresh this area, I can see there is the sample database. So similarly, back in the code, if I wanted to get rid of that database, well, I don't have an example for getting rid of the database, but I do have one for dropping a table. So you could probably figure that you use the keyword drop. So I'm going to come back here, and instead of create database, I'm going to say drop. And I'm going to go ahead and press F5 to run this code. And it says command completed successfully. And I'm going to come over here, press F5, and you can see that that database is gone. So there's the code way to create the space for the database. Now I'm going to do it using the interface. So I'm going to close this window. So in the interface, I can simply come up here to the databases folder, right-click, and choose New Database. There are a number of options here that I want to consider, but for now I'm just going to put in a database name. So I'll call this, I'm actually going to give this a name that I'm going to use in just a second. I'll call this the product categories, or product category database. And I'll click OK. And now if I hit F5 to refresh, you can see there's the product category database. So same thing, but this time I use the interface. If I expand this too, either in this case or when I did it earlier using the code, you would see these different folders underneath. The folders you know from, for example, the AdventureWorks databases. So you'll always get this structure, the database diagrams folder, the tables, views, etc. Okay, next step. So now I've got the database. Now what I want to do is import this data into that database. I could create these tables, but I already have some data in there. But I could use code. Back here I could find the code for creating a table and adding those columns and the data types. but I'm going to do that by importing. One thing to note before you import, you want to make sure that you clean up your data. So I'm using Excel, and what I did in Excel is I had these nice rows here for the name of the table, and these rows here that were indicating, the primary keys and the foreign keys. And those are all nice, but they won't work so well for importing. When I import, I want just column headers and the rows. And I don't want a little extra columns or rows for aesthetic purposes. So what I need to do is go to each of these tables and delete them. Of course, I could select all the tabs, but I'll just do it 3 times to really emphasize to you it's important to clean up your spreadsheet. And of course, I want to delete this row 2 as well, because I don't want that to be imported. That was just for me. And I've already gone down here at the bottom and added the table names to the worksheet tabs. And that's a great idea because it's going to grab those and use those as the table names. All right, I've cleaned up the file. I'm going to save it. I'm ready to go. And so now I'm going to go back and import it. And there was a separate video that showed this. This was the video that did not have audio, and it showed you how to import. But I'm going to go ahead and repeat it. So I'm going to the database here, and I'm going to right-click on the database. And I'm going to go to Tasks, and I'm going to go down here to Import Data. And I'll hit Next. It asks me what the data source is, and it's an Excel spreadsheet. It asks me where it is, and so I'm going to click here and browse to find it. Here it is. And importantly, down here, there's a check mark next to first row has column names, and I'll hit Next. This says what's the destination, and I'm going to go way to the bottom. It's SQL Server Native Client 11.0. And I'll leave this on the default and hit Next. I'm going to leave this on the default. I'm copying data. I'm not writing a query to do it. I'm just copying data. And here it's going to show me all of the different Excel spreadsheets. You may have extra spreadsheets, maybe one that has images or notes or diagrams, and so the nice thing here is you can select what you want and leave out what you don't want. In this case, I just have 3 spreadsheet tabs and I want all of them. The other thing I might do here is I might edit this. So for example, I don't want the dollar signs here, so I'm getting rid of those. And even in this dialog box, I can edit the data type and other details, but I can also do that after the fact. I'm going to go ahead and hit Next. And this just says, do you want to run immediately? And I'm going to hit Next. And it's ready to go. I'm going to hit Finish. And I really do want to watch this. So it's going through this, and it seems to all be successful, but sometimes it won't be. Sometimes something will happen, and it won't be able to import, some records or maybe a table. So you want to watch that and just make a note of that. I can check over here too and see how many rows were transferred and make sure that that's accurate. All right, so it looked like it was successful for me. There are no errors. I'm going to go ahead and close, and I'm going to come over here and refresh by hitting the F5 key, and I'll expand the tables folder, and there are those 3 tables. All right. That's it for this video.